Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at MS Dynamics World. On this episode, I am welcoming Murray Fife. He is a veteran of the Dynamics 365 and Dynamics ERP space. He's a prolific author, trainer, and strategist for D365 finance and supply chain management. I first met Murray in my early days covering Microsoft business applications, and over the years, he's always brought a unique perspective to his work, whether he has focused on industry capabilities, ERP modules, solution architecture, or training and learning. If you follow Dynamics 365 on LinkedIn, chances are you have seen at least some of Murray's most recent work, including his advanced D&D themed exploration of F&SCM, as well as his latest D365 guides. Murray tells us more about what he has discovered as he's worked through so much of the platform and how people can use his approach to build their own base of knowledge to deploy a D365 F&SCM solution. We also talk about his views on how AI-based tools like MCP and agents will begin to transform ERP experiences, but why it's hard to predict exactly how this technology will change the way organizations use something like a D365 solution. All right. Well, Murray Fife, it is so great to have you here with me. I can't believe we haven't done a podcast together, that I haven't had you on here. I'm both a little bit ashamed of that, but also thrilled to have you. So welcome.
Oh, it's fantastic to be on the podcast. I'm glad that I strong-armed you into letting me talk.
I reject that. I reject that qualification. But no, let's start by just talking about sort of what you've been up to, because I see your work almost on a daily basis. You have a tremendous output, and most of what I'm seeing right now is and I'm always afraid I'm going to get the name wrong, but the AD and D365 setup series or implementation series. Can you talk a little bit about that for anyone who hasn't seen it on LinkedIn? Maybe what it's all about.
Yeah. So what for a long time I've had guides. I've been creating guides and how-to guides on how to set up Dynamics, and this year was my goal to sort of revamp them and spend a little bit of time and sort of maybe rebrand them and make them a little bit more interesting. So that brought out the AD&D 365 training edition, which is the Advanced Dungeons and Dynamics 365 sort of themed training, where, as you can guess, it's sort of based around the Dungeons and Dragons, which I chose partly because it's a real life agnostic sort of scenario, but it's actually got a lot of background and rules that you can go back and you can reference and find things on. So I sort of this year I put the writing of all of this content on the front burner, and I've been updating and creating all the new versions of the content, and also creating new scenarios and new content, trying to almost on a daily basis to sort of excite people about Dynamics and maybe learning a little bit about some of the scenarios that aren't like just creating a sales order. How would you do these things in Dynamics 365, and trying to run through the thought process of how to configure some more sort of obscure scenarios in the system. So you've probably anyone who's following me on LinkedIn is probably sick and tired of these, but I'm just going to keep on using the brute force method of trying to get people excited about Dynamics.
I imagine there's a good overlap, between people who work in sort of business systems and who also have some interest in that. And I certainly respect sort of the work that you're putting into that. When it comes to sort of the creativity of it, I mean, can you talk a little bit more about how you're generating not just ideas, but sort of what inspires you about it?
A lot of the times as I'm going out and trying to create some new content or maybe new scenarios, a lot of it is based off what I'm working on or what projects I'm working on at that time, or maybe what comes up on LinkedIn is sort of interesting topics, or maybe something that just some crazy idea that I have around that. But the what I'm trying to do after you go out and say, after we look at how do you set up Dynamics, or really partly how do you set up an ERP system, because they're all very similar, then there's everything's very similar until you get to different scenarios, and there's different businesses that have different requirements. So a lot of the additional sort of scenario content that I create is really based off what's happening at that time, and also what new features are coming out in Dynamics. So, for example, there's um, there's some new features around quality management and inline quality tests. So I thought, how would that apply to a business, and how would you use that, and then what scenarios would come up around that would be really interesting to use as a model that we could go out and then try to sort of learn how to set up the system. Some of these things I don't even there may not be a set way that you go out and work through these, but they give you an interesting way to think about ERP and businesses. And one of the things you said, Jason, you said, "Well, I'm not really a Dungeon and Dragon person," and which is fine, because it's what I'm using as the backdrop is really just it's just an error or a non-current sort of scenario or business that we can go out and we can model that isn't complicated by uh, some of the real world problems that people come up with when they're setting up Dynamics. So, for example, if we're looking at tax, then a lot of people probably don't know how to set up tax structures or taxing agencies within the system, because it's in the real world it's complicated and it's hard. But what if you what if you can distill it down and have a scenario where you don't have, like for the US, you don't have city tax and state tax and county tax and all of these things. What if you just had one sort of tax payment that maybe you're paying to guilds or something like that? Then it's a lot easier for you to understand the setup and then translate it out or extrapolate it out to the real world and use it as a foundation to create to create the examples that you would need in the real world. So, and really I've got to think whether the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is sort of working against me, because some people love it and some people think it's brilliant. Some people that say, well, it's not really my thing. But the only difference between the setting up of a business in that scenario and setting one up in, like, the US, is that instead of using dollars, you're using coins. So it's uh, all of the same business sort of functions still remain the same, and also it allowed me to go out and create a simplified ledger and not overcomplicate things sort of as we're going and setting these things up. So that's a little bit of insight sort of on how I'm sort of thinking about these, and why there's sort of like these scenarios.
Yeah, because you also have other guides, right, for configuring many modules of finance and supply chain management, right? I mean, how do you explain how this work sort of sits alongside that work?
Yeah, and so when one of the things that I don't know whether I'm listening inside of a vacuum, or the bell jar about bell vacuum, where people are saying the same thing. But one of the problems with the traditional learning, uh, and I'm not saying that the Microsoft learning is bad. The Microsoft learning is great, but it's very disconnected and disjointed. So you can go and find everything that you want, but there's no really contiguous sort of story around all the data. It's just explaining a feature and sort of some of the things that set it up. So with the guides that I created, I set them up by modules, sort of moving from the foundational modules all the way up to the transactional modules. And if you're going out and learning the system this way, then what you do is you start at the beginning and then you move step by step to the end, and then everything is connected to each other. So you start with the creating a legal entity, then you set up the ledger, and then cash and bank management and payables and receivables and some of the other financial areas, and then you go over to supply chain and you set up the products and inventory, then purchasing, and then sales. And then after you've done that, then you've got a base knowledge and you can set up production, you can set up projects, you can set up warehouse management and transportation management and move them all the way through. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to create this continuous story in a consistent setting that helps you sort of connect the dots between the different modules by actually working through them one by one. And some of the feedback that I've got from some people is that, or from some seasoned consultants, is that they've gone through it, but maybe they've been a supply chain management person, but they go through the financials and they learn financials, which in itself was really useful for me to learn as well, because I went through the same process. And then they've got a grounding in financials. Or if you're on the financial side, then maybe you learn supply chain, maybe you learn how the costing works, and that sort of that gets you out of your comfort zone into a different area of the system. But my whole vision and strategy for this was to have a continuous story to help you with the learning, and then start from the beginning, and then everything builds on top of each other, so that then you can get that vision in your head of how everything works.
Yeah, I've kind of always imagined this series and this work as really geared toward people who either want to become really great solution architects, if they're sort of on the professional services side of the world, or if they sort of work for a Microsoft customer, that they're really like a solution owner type, or I don't know if administrator is the right word, but kind of the sort of the person who understands from the customer perspective sort of what the big picture is and how all of these elements are supposed to help their company, and is making sort of the big decisions on that side, as opposed to individual contributors who are maybe using one module or a few modules. Is that how you see the audience?
Yeah, and that's more of the audience. It's someone who wants to understand the whole system. This isn't training necessarily for like an accounts payable clerk, even though they've got a great job and there's a lot of things that they do. They're very task oriented, but for people that are trying to work out what Dynamics does and what the capabilities are, then it's a great, I believe, learning the entire system is a great way to see it. You may not be an expert in all of these areas, and you may never be an expert. But if you're in supply chain, then it might be interesting to understand a little bit about how the finance works and how that impacts it when you go out and do whatever coding you do, or account coding that you do within the supply chain module. And also, people, I don't know whether this is true or just my perception, but a lot of people stay in their lane. They stay in like manufacturing, or maybe they're a manufacturing person, or they're a distribution person, or they're a finance person, or whatever. And being a specialist is good, but you become more rounded if you understand more and more of the system. And this is partly also my experience, because more focused on like the distribution or the supply chain and some of the areas, maybe not even the manufacturing. And then as I was working through this process, then I I branched out and I learned the different areas, the projects, more about the supply chain and the planning and so forth, and then also the over time the financials as well. And I think that gives me a very very valuable insight into how the system works in totality rather than just in sort of my individual area.
And speaking of how the system works, I wanted to learn more about some of your other recent experiences, which are, I guess, related to sort of building out the latest F&O database for, I guess, the purposes of, is it Microsoft's official sort of demo database that they distribute out to the world? Is that what you've been working on, or is it more of a generalized demo database? But anyway, I wanted to learn more about that work. Can you say a little bit more about sort of what you've been discovering there?
Yeah, and this has been super interesting and also super exciting for me. I've had the opportunity to be to work or to work with Microsoft, so contracting with them to build out the new version of the demo database that everyone's going to use. So when you get a demo environment of Dynamics, then for everyone who's familiar with it, almost everyone, then what you do is you work in the USMF company, and the that's where all of the main development data is that the dev group put in for sample information. That's this USMF has been around for a long time, longer than I think I've been working with Microsoft, and it's been upgraded over time. And as a result, it's it's got a lot of uh, it's got a lot of quirky information inside of it. So Microsoft had an initiative to go out and create the new a new database. Firstly for marketing, so that marketing could have a database that they could show all of the new products capabilities in. But then also for anyone who's going out and looking at the demo database to see all the new functionality that's in there and see it uh, in a consistent view with a consistent story around that. So what we've built, and this should be, uh, I know this is being delivered out as part of the sample demo database, or should be, is there's going to be a new company which is Contoso Coffee, and everyone sort of rolls their eyes and says, What's coffee? Coffee doesn't apply to a lot of people, but the interesting thing about coffee is that, or the coffee scenario is that it's a great ecosystem for almost all of the capabilities within Dynamics. Everything except for financial, everything except for like banking and some of these things, because you can. We've built into this demo database the creation of products, the manufacturing, but also the engineering change management, which has got data in USMF, but it's sort of over in a German company, which is a little bit funny. And then also there's expanded pricing scenarios, so we can showcase the examples of the new advanced pricing, where you go out and you can set up pricing based on attributes, or you based off tiers or different capabilities within the pricing. There's the quality is fully configured out. We have not only discrete manufacturing but process manufacturing, and the capability that if we wanted to have packaged and traditional and catch weight products, then coffee works really well because you've got coffee machines or you've got coffee beans and all of those things. And then there's even more elaborate things where we're going out and we have intercompany trading, selling down into Peru, into a company in Lima, so that we can have all. I learned more about the currency revaluations and adjustments than I ever really wanted to know, but it made me a better person to learn that. And then also all of the new capabilities, all of the new Dataverse modules, like the demand planning, the recruitment, the HR, the all of these sort of add-on extensions are going to have their own data that links in and talks to Contoso Coffee just by itself. So over the past, I think it's been nearly 12 months now that we've been working on this, and it's been released out in a couple of iterations. But the we've got a new way of looking at dynamics that isn't just um, stereo machines and wires, which is really the USMF sort of process that we've got in there. We'll also have the project operations integrated into there with coffee services that then allows us to expand out to like field service on the CE side and link into the asset management and all those things. So we've thought through this setup and built out a fully fleshed out idea of how a company could go out and use Dynamics. So, so it's been really interesting, and I've learned even more than I did that I knew in the past, because there's there's all of these new modules like the engineering change management that has nuances inside of it, but only a few people know about it because uh, there's very few demo scripts that are out there, and then as part of the resources, then there's going to be fully fleshed out demo scripts that people can go out and they could uh, go out and show all of these capabilities with just a little bit of elbow grease learning those scripts.
Yeah, would that be an example of a feature that or a capability that has been there and hasn't been kind of shown off? People haven't showed it off the way it deserved, or has Microsoft made some improvements and made it a more mature feature?
No, for like the I'll give two examples, like the engineering change management. What and if stop me if I'm starting to get too far down into the weeds. But when you go out and when you've got like let's say a coffee machine, and then you've got a bill of materials associated with it, that normally it'd just be just be in the company, and then you'd go and modify the bill of materials, and then that would be what you're going out and creating again. But the engineering change management, which I think was incorporated in the system maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you go out and you actually have an engineering change management organization, another legal entity, and then they're like the master holder of all of the bill of materials and the routes and how you should be making this, and also they control the products or the components that should go in there, and they've got R&D products that aren't in the operational entity. And then when they're happy with it, then they say, I'm going to release this down to the operational company. And then it goes and it creates all of the products. Where the data was in Dynamics, but it was really obscure because you had to have a separate legal entity. Then they went out and they used the German company as an engineering company, which was a little bit funny. And then you had to go there, but even I didn't know how that process worked, and there were a handful of TSs in Microsoft that did. So now we've got a Contoso engineering that has all of these bill of materials, and it's dedicated to that. And then you can go and make a change, you can make a request, and then everything flows back. So it's a lot more understandable to people with the process. And then in our case, all the commercial coffee machines are managed that way. The other item is like the pricing management, which is a new module, and I think that's only recently been delivered out. I think it maybe within the past couple of years. And one of the normally when people look at the pricing, then they look at the trade agreements, and you say this product is $5, or next week it's going to be $5.50, and if this customer buys it, then it's going to be $5.15 or whatever you do. So you've got very simplified pricing. It works, but it's very very sort of simplified. The pricing goes out and adds a lot of levels of pricing. You can have a number of different price lists that go out and get selected. You can have adjustments and discounts, multi-level discounts that show up, and then whenever you're creating a sales order, then you get a whole wealth of pricing. But also what you can do is you can say, based off attributes of products, so not fields but attributes, then I want to go out and create this pricing structure for anything that's got this attribute. Maybe the product is on sale, or maybe it's a closeout item. Then it's going to have an additional discount associated with it. Or for a customer, maybe if they're a retail customer as opposed to a commercial customer, then they get different pricing. So those concepts and those ideas, a lot of people don't. There wasn't really a good way that any of this would be shown, and we've gone out and we've built that out. So, for example, using something I think is relatable is that there's a set of coffee syrups that the coffee shops buy, and then you've got the standard syrups, which are like vanilla, hazelnut, um, caramel, chocolate, and so forth. But then also you have the pumpkin spice, which is only available in the fall seasons here in the US, and then also it's not available outside of that. And maybe they have closeouts at the end of the season to try to get rid of it, and maybe they have early purchase promotions for the month before that allows them to do that. And then you've got pumpkin spice for the fall, and then you've got peppermint for the winter, and those can have different pricing tiers, and then they can have different prices associated with them. So again, it's really hard to learn. It took myself a lot of thinking about how this should be used just to create the examples that people can go out and reference inside of the system. So with that said, probably a lot of people demonstrating the system don't have the time to go out and dig in so much to find out this information, and we'll have that in the demo system. And then also all the customers, when they have their sort of like their demo vanilla system, then they'll have all these examples as well.
You said somewhere I don't know if you said this just to me or if you wrote it somewhere, that it's like a reverse implementation. Is that what you're talking about? Sort of going at the data and the capabilities in this way? Sort of finding building out use cases that other people can understand.
Yeah, and that's the approach that I took when I was going out and setting this up, because it's like you've got a tool and you're trying to work out how to use it, and
Yeah.
and so sometimes it's straightforward. Sometimes it's really easy to work out, but other times you've got to have a way. You've got to have a scenario that you show things that isn't really contrived, that isn't just an example that's out there that doesn't apply, that doesn't fit in with the story that you're telling with the entire system. So yeah, you're right. It's finding a reason to use the tool, and finding a reason why this tool was created in the first place, and then trying to I don't know whether it's reverse storytelling, but you need to think about how you're going to be showing this really carefully. And then other things that we've been doing as we've been setting this up is also making sure that the data that's in the system is sensible and also are pertinent, and also not rubbish as well. So I don't know. Some It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you go into a form and it's uh, like discount code, and it's discount code 1, discount code 2, discount code 3, or test discount or something like that. Sometimes those get snuck into the demo database, but everything that is created, everything that's built in the database has got a purpose and a reason and sensibility to it. So, for example, with all the quality, we've got proper quality test instruments. We've got unit of measures that are interesting and unique from a uh, from a data standpoint, or we've got for pricing groups. It's not like price group 1, price group 2. It's it's uh, it's seasonal pricing, it's customer based pricing, it's um, uh, coffee shop pricing versus retail store pricing, and so forth. So it's one of the things I've been trying to do is trying to be very purposeful and deliberate with the data, and I've I'm not ashamed to say that uh, GPT has been a godsend for creating demo data that sticks with a theme.
That's interesting. Yeah, I guess that would be a good seem to be a good use of it for both scenarios and data. And you've been I hope I didn't get this wrong, but you've been also creating videos as you've gone along, right? Or has that been more on the AD and D365 side, or has that been more on the demo creation side?
Yes, so this is more on the AD&D 365 side. Something that I've been doing over probably the past 3 or 4 months is one of the themes that I had with the Advanced Dungeons and Dynamics 365, all the bare bones configurations guides, was that you're supposed to start at the beginning and get to the end and have that set up. So I thought, what if I sat down and every day, or I I plan to do it for 4 days a week. What if I spent 30 minutes and I just go out and do a live stream and set up the system and show people the steps that you need to go through to set up dynamics, and also create a library of these setup steps along the way to see how that works. So that's what I've been doing. I've been uh, spending half an hour, or creating these half-hour configuration live streams, and working through all the new versions of the guides that I'm creating, partly to beta test them and maybe play test them myself to make sure that that if I can follow them myself, then other people should be able to follow them. And I've been doing that. I've been giving people a step by step walkthrough of how you would go out and configure Dynamics 365, from having nothing all the way up to being able to take, in the end, or with when I finish this, have all of the purchasing and sales and inventory and ledger and everything configured in the system, as sort of like a base example. So I've been, and also partly this is being on video, or creating videos hasn't really been a strong point of uh, for myself. Partly because when you create videos for training, sometimes you get stuck um, in the pursuit for perfection, and they trying to make everything right and so forth. So I found that the live stream format, where if someone shows up, then that's fine. But it is a live stream. It's if things for the most part, 99% touchwood of the time it works, but sometimes it doesn't. But I'm not bogged down with that art of perfection. I think I do a pretty good job with these, but they're they're very simple and not raw, but they are just me going through and setting up the system step by step in a real time format.
Yeah, I'll have to check those out. We'll put a link in the show notes, obviously, for that, and where people can go to see them as you continue broadcasting. Yeah, what else? I mean, any other like recommendations for listeners in terms of like what they really should keep their eyes open for in the latest release, in terms of what you've got demo data for now, and what kind of scenarios, any others perhaps that are really kind of exciting and new from what you've had your hands on?
I'll jump to what I think is one of the most exciting sort of components within Dynamics, and that's the MCP server. So, and for those listening that don't know what the MCP server is, then it's the way that I think of it. It's a web service or a web. It's like a web service or a web API that you can connect into AI. So you can connect. Right now, you can connect up like ChatGPT or the AI models, or even the tools like LM Studio, so forth, to talk to this MCP server, and the AI can ask it questions. And a couple of months ago, it was announced that there is an MCP server for Dynamics, and what that would allow you to do, or is the automation bots could go out and they could grab information. They could find orders, or they could find products, and they could look up information that's associated with it. So it could sort of query that information and then pull the information back. Now, that was the first iteration, and from what I understand, there's going to be more work put into that, where it becomes more genericized. So where there's I don't know whether it's going to allow the MCP server to update Dynamics, but it's going to be able to access more and more of the information in there, and then the AI agents don't necessarily need to just be restricted to products and sales orders and invoices and purchase orders and so forth. It could have access to all of the customer information and all of the history and all of the other entities that aren't normally that aren't currently available. So then, what that means is that we can have these agents go out and scour all the information in Dynamics and then create even better responses. So, for example, look up inventory levels, look up forecasts, look up all of the any demand that's in there. Go out and look at collection information. Go and look at any notes that are in there, and then use that to condense condense it down into information that we can use through agents themselves. So that's a really exciting technology, which sort of opens up all the information within Dynamics in a secure way to agents that then can do some of the work for us, whether that replaces work or whether that just augments it and makes people smarter, or makes it so that people don't have to go out and search through all of these different areas. Then then we'll see how that works. But the MCP servers are really interesting, and I'm looking forward to what happens there. And then to push that out even further, then whether agents start going out and connecting to other ERP MCP servers to get information, for example, maybe from asset management servers, or maybe they're going out to other financial systems. And then you can use these agents to do all the distilling of information. Then that, how interesting would that be? Because it's like a generic API that then that we don't have to go out and program for the most part. So from a new technology, I think that is going to take the agent, the agentic AI, one step further and closer to sort of like black boxing ERP.
I am very interested to see how how Dynamics 365, F&SCM customers take to this, because my impression is that businesses have exacting processes and data management rules and everything that goes into those for running their business, and how that filters down to like some of the the black box idea that you've described, or the being sort of on different sides of a pane of glass. It's super interesting to me to see how customers really begin taking to that in a meaningful way. So yeah, I agree. It's really, really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah. And I also agree with what you're saying, because there's been some chatter on LinkedIn where people are saying, well, ERP is dead. ERP is gone. There's never going ERP is history. There's never going to be ERP again. But that's not completely true. What they really should be saying, or maybe what they're trying to say, is that traditional monolithic ERP, or one ERP system, is that rules them all, maybe isn't the future. But then again, that's what everyone's doing that already. They don't have one ERP system, or they don't have one system. They have multiple systems that maybe will be incorporated or have the information shared a little bit more without the need for IT to go out and create all of these sort of interfaces and so forth. But it's the other point that you brought up that I agree wholeheartedly as well, that ERP is a controlled system, and it's controlled for a reason. So there's only certain ways that you can create a posting, and even in that sense, there's certain ways that you have to do things for good business practices. So to say that you still need the system of record, and you still need the control and the management in the back end to make sure that everything is done right. You can't just jimmy the inventory. It needs to be handled properly, and it needs to go and manage the costing and so forth. So there's ERP, and I should never say never, but ERP is as a backbone is going to be around for a while. Or
yeah, it's like living on two sides of. I keep coming back to this when I think of MCP, but I think of it as like two sides, living on two sides of a mirror, or living on two sides of a pane of glass. Like you said, I mean, it's not an API exactly the way we think of a web API, perhaps, but it's similar to that, and there's a world behind it that I think, to your point, has to function the way everyone expects it to.
Now, there's other ways that agents can go and save us a lot of time, and that's with a lot of the data setup. So maybe not the transactions, or maybe transactions, but still the impact of the transactions need to be controlled in the back end. But if there's a lot of legwork that gets done when you go out and when you set up information, or when you set up a customer, when you set up a product, or when you set up even a completely new legal entity or a general ledger, then it takes time. That sort of rolls back to the configuration guides that I have. It sort of highlights that these are the steps you have to go through in order to set these up. But the agents can, for like master data, then if we're going out, say we want to create a new customer, then there shouldn't be any reason now why anyone goes out and goes to the new customer record, then creates a new customer, gives it a name, and then assigns it to a customer group, and then adds an address to it, and then goes out and links it to a pricing group, and all of these things. That's something that can be streamlined and automated through an agent itself. So you could say, I'm creating a new customer for the First Perk Cafe, and it's in XX Street in Redmond in Washington. Then that should be all the information that you need to give it for the agent to go out and almost create a suggestion. So it can intuit that this is a cafe. It could look up the data and see that we've got pricing for we've got customers broken out into groupings based on being a coffee shop. So therefore, they should be part of this group. So how much time would be improved by the fact that if the agents can go out and query this information and then intuit more details around it, and then say, I'm going to create I'll create this customer for you, and this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to set it up. Are there any changes that you want? Did I get it right? And then you could iterate with it and make whatever changes you want. You could say, this is a VIP customer. We want to treat it a different way. And then it'd go out and take all of that data that you've given it sort of as sort of like generic information, and then convert it over to metadata, and then push that into Dynamics and have that information set up. So that the improvements on sort of like data setup would be huge. And also say, for example, if you want to say, I want to create a new product, and it's going to be similar to this coffee machine, it's going to have a new version, then why go through all of the setup of going and creating in Dynamics like a released product, and then going into the supply groups and setting up, linking it to pricing, and then go and create custom pricing? Then that's just legwork that an agent could do. So that's where I see the MCP server going out and helping with a lot of this automation. Because one of the things I found is that as an experiment, I took all of my guides and I put it into a GPT model. So that said, this is, in other words, saying this is how we're setting up this Waterdeep Trading Company, and these are all the steps that we've required. And then I can just using that as sort of like guidance, then I can go out and I can get the agents to create new training for different scenarios based off just the key information that I've asked, or I can tell the agents to convert sort of this concept of a customer or a product into metadata that's consistent, that then I could go out and maybe use as an import file. That's where I see all of these helpers sort of helping us along the way, not replacing us right now anyway. But it's super interesting what you can get the agents to do right now.
Yeah, still plenty to be explored there, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to sort of call out to our readers before we wrap up?
I'd love more people to see what I'm doing, but I know a lot of people on LinkedIn see what I'm posting. So I won't. If you want to, if anyone wants to see what I'm doing, then they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm really easy to find, but this is a really interesting time, and for me personally, I think it's a new time for learning. And there's so much out there. And even just from Dynamics, then the Dynamics platformscape is changing, and there's going to be so much that's happening that I'm really excited to learn more around that. And then I'm just going to keep on working through my guides and try to be that one-man band that's trying to get people to learn more about Dynamics.
Well, Murray, after all these years, it's still always great to catch up with you. I'm sorry it's been so long. We'll have to do it again soon. Maybe we can have you dive into maybe one of these areas in more detail for our readers at some point, something like that. But yeah, thanks so much for stopping by.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me for this virtual coffee chat.
This has been another episode of the MCW podcast. My thanks once again to Murray Fife for joining me here. To learn more about Murray's work, we'll post a few links in the show notes, including information on his guides and the AD and D365 project. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jason@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.